The pen my mother slid across the table was the same gold one she used to sign our Christmas cards. It stopped against my plate, pointing at me like a small accusation. Across the dining room sat three lawyers I had never met, their briefcases open, their pages fanned out under the warm yellow light my mother always kept too low. My father wouldn't look at me. My sister Morgan was smiling the way she smiled at price tags. And my mother folded her hands, leaned in, and said the thing she'd been practicing all week. "Sign this, or you'll regret it." I looked at that gold pen for a long moment. I didn't reach for it. I just said the thing I'd been saving all night, and within a minute that room emptied out like someone had pulled a drain. But to understand how I ended up across a table from three strangers with documents, you have to go back to the morning I finally told my family no. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet women who finally stop apologizing for protecting themselves. I'm Faye. If a family ever taught you that love came with an invoice attached, stay close. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe, because this one took me 34 years to learn and one dinner to finish. I keep a small bookkeeping firm in Harlow, Ohio, 2 rooms above a hardware store, my name on the glass. Sinclair Books. I'm 34 now, and I built it client by client over the last 10 years, the way you fill a ledger, one honest line at a time. I'm good with numbers because numbers don't flinch and they don't flatter you. They just tell you where the money went. Most mornings start the same. Coffee with Daniel, the radio low, the smell of toner and old paper. Daniel is steady in a way my family never trusted because steady doesn't impress people who want to be dazzled. He'd butter his toast and ask about my day like it mattered, and I'd pretend that was normal, that everyone had this. I didn't grow up with this. I learned quiet by surviving the loud. People in town think I'm reserved. The truth is, I'm just careful. When you spend your childhood absorbing other people's emergencies, you get very good at watching for the next one before it lands. So when my phone rang that Tuesday and my mother's name lit up the screen, my stomach knew before my head did. I let it ring twice. I always let it ring twice, a small private mutiny nobody could see. Then I answered, because that's the other thing they taught me, that you always answer, that family means you pick up no matter what you're in the middle of. "Faye, honey," she said, and her voice had that bright edge she used when she wanted something expensive. "I have the most wonderful news." Daniel looked up from his toast and watched my face change. I turned toward the window so he couldn't read it. "It's about your sister," my mother said. And just like that, the careful little life I'd built started ticking like something with a fuse. Morgan was engaged to Ethan Aldridge, of the Aldridge family, who owned half the nice things in our county and had their name carved into the wing of the hospital. My mother said his name slowly, the way you set down good china. I told her I was happy for Morgan. And I was, mostly. "We're going to do this right," she said. "A real wedding, something this family can be proud of." I noticed the word right away. We. In our family, we was a coat that only ever fit one person. "How right are we talking?" I asked. She laughed, delighted I'd asked. 50,000, give or take. The Aldridges are doing a beautiful thing, but the bride's family hosts. That's tradition, Faye. That's how it's done. I sat very still. $50,000 was more than my parents had cleared in any year I could remember. It was, I understood without being told, a number meant for me. "And you know how your father and I are stretched," she went on, lighter now, as if discussing weather. "But you've done so well. You've always been our responsible one." Responsible? That word had been a leash my whole life, dressed up as a compliment. "Mom," I started. "Faye." Her voice cooled by exactly 1 degree. "Family doesn't keep score." There it was. The sentence she reached for whenever the math stopped working in her favor. Family doesn't keep score. She'd been saying it to me since I was 16, and every single time it meant the same thing. It meant pay. I told her I needed to think. She heard a yes, because she always heard a yes, and she hung up planning flowers. I set the phone down on the desk and stared at it. Daniel didn't ask. He just refilled my coffee, which is its own kind of question. I was 16 the first time I paid a bill that wasn't mine. My father's contracting business had been wobbling for a year, though nobody used that word at home. We used softer ones. Slow season. A rough patch. Then the electric company sent the second notice, red ink across the top, and my mother cried at the kitchen table while Morgan, 8 years old, watched cartoons in the next room. I had a part-time job at the Walgreens on Route 9. I had $211 saved for a class trip. I gave it to my mother before I could think too hard about it, and the relief on her face did something permanent to me. It taught me that I could fix things, that being needed felt almost exactly like being loved, close enough that a 16-year-old couldn't tell them apart. By the time I was 18, the business was gone for good, and the rough patch had a name now: bankruptcy, spoken only in whispers at church. I worked through community college doing other people's books. I learned that money has a memory even when people don't. And somewhere in those years, without anyone deciding it out loud, I became the family's emergency fund. The car repairs, the tax surprises, Morgan's braces, her first apartment deposit, the time she totaled a leased car at 22. I covered them. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was temporary. But there's a thing nobody warns you about being the one who always pays. The bills get bigger because nobody ever has to feel the weight but you. And the day you finally hesitate, you stop being a daughter and become a problem. I didn't know yet that I was already standing at the edge of that day. I just knew the number she'd said felt different. 50,000. It felt less like a request and more like a test. There was one thing my family didn't know about me, and I'd worked hard to keep it that way. 14 months earlier, I had married Daniel Hartley at the county courthouse on a Thursday, with 2 strangers as witnesses and a lunch of diner pie afterward. No announcement. No ring at Christmas dinner. Nothing they could touch. People assume you hide a marriage out of shame. I hid mine out of arithmetic. Years back, I'd brought a boyfriend home. A kind man named Greg, who taught middle school science. Within an hour, my mother had asked his salary twice. My father had called teaching a nice little job for a man, and Morgan had laughed at his shoes. By dessert, they had appraised him like a used car and found him cheap. He didn't call me again. I didn't blame him. So when Daniel came into my life, quiet and exact, an attorney who handled contracts and estates in the next county over, I made a decision. I would not hand my family one more person to put a price on. They'd met him once, briefly, and dismissed him as that paralegal phase seeing, and I let them believe it. It was safer. Daniel understood. He came from people who showed love by fixing the porch step before you noticed it was loose, not by counting what they were owed. He never pushed me to tell them. He only said once, "When you're ready, I'll be standing right there." That night, after the phone call, he sat across from me at our own kitchen table and asked what I wanted to do. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to just write the check and make it stop." He nodded slowly. Then he said the thing I'd been raised never to consider. "Or you could find out what the money's actually for." I almost laughed. "I'm a bookkeeper. I always keep the receipts. I just hadn't thought to read my own family's." 3 days later, my mother summoned me to the house for what she called a planning coffee. I drove the 15 minutes across town with my hands too tight on the wheel. The old house looked the same as always, proud on the outside, tired underneath, like a lot of things in my family. Morgan was already there, spreading glossy printouts across the dining table. Venues, a florist from Columbus, a photographer who charged by the hour and shot in natural light only. My mother had a legal pad with a column of numbers, and I could see from the doorway that the bottom line was circled twice. "There she is," my mother said warmly. "Sit, sit. We saved you the good chair." The good chair. They'd never saved me anything before they needed something. Morgan slid a printout toward me without looking up. "The Whitfield barn does weddings now. It's gorgeous. The Aldridges got married at places like this." She said the name like a password. I looked at the number on the legal pad. $52,400. That's higher than 50, I said. My mother waved her hand. Buffers. You always taught us about buffers. She smiled at her own cleverness. We thought, since you handle money for a living, you could just manage the whole thing. Pay the vendors directly. Keep it tidy. It was so smooth I almost admired it. They weren't asking me for $50,000. They were appointing me the bank, the bookkeeper, and the bottomless account, all in one warm breath. Morgan finally looked at me, bright and certain. You don't mind, right? You don't even have kids. What else are you saving for? The room went quiet for a second. My father, by the window, said nothing, which was its own answer. I felt the old reflex rise in me, the yes that had paid for everything. For the first time in my life, I held it behind my teeth. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either, which is its own kind of cowardice, and I knew it the second the words left me. Let me look at the numbers, I said. I'll get back to you by the weekend. My mother beamed like I'd already signed. Morgan went back to her printouts. The matter closed in her mind. On the drive home, the shame sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. I'd built a whole life on telling people the truth about their finances, and I couldn't tell my own family one honest word. When I walked in, Daniel was at the table with his reading glasses on, marking up a contract for work. He looked at my face and set down his pen. What did you say? He asked. I said I'd think about it. He didn't sigh. He didn't lecture. He just nodded, the way he does when he's deciding whether to say the hard thing. Faye, you've thought about it for 18 years, he said gently. What you haven't done is decide. That landed harder than any argument. He was right. I had been thinking about it my entire adult life, every time the phone rang twice. Thinking was just the long word I used for giving in slowly. I sat down across from him. If I say no, I said, they'll make it the worst thing I've ever done. My mother will call everyone. Aunt Carol. The whole church. By Sunday, I'll be the selfish one who ruined Morgan's wedding. Probably, he agreed. And if you say yes? I thought about the legal pad, the buffers, the way the number kept growing before anyone had paid for a single thing. If I say yes, it never ends. I said quietly. There's a wedding, then a house, then a baby, then something. Daniel reached across and put his hand over mine. Then you already know what you have to do. You just don't know how to survive it yet. I called on Saturday morning on purpose because mornings are when I'm bravest. My mother answered on the first ring. Faye, perfect timing. I've got the florist on hold. Mom, I said, I can't fund the wedding. The line went so quiet I could hear the kitchen clock she'd had for 30 years. I'm happy to help with something specific, I went on, keeping my voice level the way I do with clients who are about to panic. A gift, like anyone would give, but I can't take on $50,000. That's not a number I can carry, and it's not fair to ask me to. Carrie, she repeated, as if I'd cursed. It's your sister's wedding. I know. After everything this family has done for you. I almost asked her to list it. I didn't. There was a rustle, a hand over the phone, muffled voices. Then Morgan was on the line, and her voice had teeth. Are you serious right now? You're really going to do this to me? I'm not doing anything to you, Morgan. Yes, you are. You have all that money, and you're choosing to humiliate me in front of Ethan's family. You know what your problem is? She said. It's just money, Faye. You're the only one who counts it. There was a whole life in that sentence. The braces, the deposits, the totaled car, all of it counted by exactly one person, and that person was somehow the villain for noticing. Yes, I said. I count it. That's literally my job. She hung up. My mother didn't call back, which was worse. The silence that followed was tactical. I knew that even then. In my family, silence wasn't peace. It was a wind-up. I stood in my kitchen with the dial tone in my ear, and I felt two things at once that I'd never felt together before. Free and afraid. Because I knew them. And no had never once been the end of it. The campaign started within a day. Aunt Carol called to say she was worried about me, which in our family is the polite opening of a knife. My cousin texted a paragraph about how blood is thicker than bank accounts. Someone from the church left a voicemail about the importance of family unity, gentle and devastating, clearly coached. My mother had mobilized the whole network faster than any wedding planner could have. That was the part that stopped me. I'd said no on Saturday morning. By Sunday night, a dozen people who'd never once asked how my business was doing suddenly had detailed opinions about my generosity. It was too fast, too organized. People don't move that quickly out of hurt feelings. They move that quickly when there's a deadline. I sat at my desk that night and did the thing I do best. I got curious instead of upset. Why 50,000 exactly? And why now? Morgan and Ethan had only been engaged a few weeks. No date was set that I'd heard. Yet my mother was acting like the money had to be locked down immediately, like the wedding wasn't the goal, but the trigger for something else. I opened a fresh page in my notebook and wrote a single question at the top. What is this money actually for? Then, underneath, almost without meaning to, I wrote a second line. Why do they need it before the wedding instead of for it? Daniel came in around midnight and found me there. He read the two questions over my shoulder. He didn't say anything clever. He just said, "You're not asking like a daughter anymore. You're asking like an accountant." Is that bad? No, he said. It's the first smart thing this family's made you do in years. Outside, a car slowed in front of our house, then drove on. Probably nothing, but my skin prickled anyway. The wind-up had started, and I still couldn't see the pitch. I'd done my parents' taxes for years, so I knew their finances better than they thought. Or, I thought I did. The next morning, I pulled the old files I kept, the way I keep everything, organized and dated. And something didn't sit right. 18 months back, I'd helped my mother tidy up the books for the church building fund, a volunteer thing she'd roped me into. At the time, I'd noticed the house had a new line on it, a refinance, but she'd brushed it off as your father's idea, lower rate, nothing to worry about. I'd let it go. You let a lot go for family. Now I looked at it with cold eyes. The refinance hadn't lowered anything. It had pulled cash out. A second mortgage, dressed up as a smart move. I sat back in my chair. My parents, who couldn't fund a wedding, had quietly borrowed against the only thing they owned outright, and somehow I'd never seen the money go anywhere. No new car, no repairs to that tired house, no vacation. So where had it gone? A business has cash flow you can trace. A family hides it in shame and good intentions. I started a spreadsheet because that's how I pray. Income I knew. Expenses I could estimate, and a hole opened up in the middle of the page, a gap of tens of thousands of dollars that had no explanation I could see. My father had been consulting since the bankruptcy, odd jobs, a little here and there, not enough to explain any of it. I stared at that gap until my coffee went cold. Whatever had swallowed that money was still hungry. And now, suddenly, urgently, they needed 50,000 more from me. Fast, before a wedding that didn't even have a date. The shape of something was forming in the dark, and I didn't like it. I picked up the phone to call my father. I wanted to hear his voice when I asked an innocent question. My father called me first, which never happened. His voice was warm and a little rehearsed, the voice of a man reading from a card. "Faye, sweetheart, your mother and I feel terrible about how Saturday went." I waited. "We don't want money to come between us. Family doesn't keep score, you know that." Twice now, in 1 week, from both of them. The phrase had become a drumbeat. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said carefully. "Listen, while I've got you," he said, sliding into it so smoothly I almost missed the seam. "Tax season's coming. I'm going to do a family filing this year, consolidate some things. Can you send me your social security number and that old W-9 from when you helped with my consulting? Just for the paperwork." Every hair on my arm stood up. My father had not filed his own taxes correctly in his life. I'd done them for him for a decade. There was no family filing. There was no reason on earth he needed my social security number and a years-old tax form. "Why would you need my SSN for your filing?" I asked, keeping it light. A pause. "You know how these things are," the accountant asked. He wasn't using an accountant. I was his accountant. "Tell you what," I said. "Send me whatever the accountant needs and I'll handle my own portion directly. That's cleaner anyway." His voice tightened, just slightly. "It's really easier if you just send it to me." "I'm sure it is," I said. "But I never send my SSN by phone or email. Professional habit." He let it go, too easily, and that scared me more than if he'd pushed. We said goodbye, like nothing had happened. The second I hung up, I called the credit bureaus and froze all 3 of my reports. Then I sat very still. Because there's only one reason a man asks his daughter for her social security number and an old signed tax form. He wants to put her name on something. That night, I told Daniel everything, laid out across our table like evidence, because that's what it was starting to feel like. The second mortgage, the missing money, the wedding with no date, my father's strange request, my frozen credit. Daniel listened the way he listens to clients in trouble. No reaction until he has all of it. Then he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Faye," he said, "I'm going to talk to you for a minute as a lawyer, not your husband." "Okay." "What you're describing, the pressure from the whole family, the guilt, the urgency, all aimed at getting you to commit money or sign something, that has a name. It's called undue influence. When it happens inside a family, the law actually takes it seriously, because families are exactly where trust gets used as a weapon." I let that sit. "And the SSN request?" His jaw tightened. "That worries me more. If your father is trying to attach your name to a debt, an old signed form and your number could be enough to make it look like you agreed to something. Document everything. Save every message. Don't sign a single thing, even something that looks harmless." I froze my credit, I said. "Good. That was smart." For a moment I felt almost safe. I had a plan, a partner, a paper trail. Then my phone buzzed on the table between us. An unknown local number. I almost didn't answer. I did. "Hello, is this Faye Sinclair?" A pleasant voice asked. "We're calling from Harlow Savings to verify some details on a joint loan application listing you as a co-borrower." The kitchen went very quiet. Daniel saw my face and went still. "I'm sorry," I said, and my voice came out level even though nothing in me was. "A loan application with my name on it?" "Yes, ma'am. Submitted last week. We're verifying details before it can move forward to signing." I hadn't applied for anything, and somehow it was already moving, just waiting on a signature I'd never given. I kept the woman on the phone as long as I could, the way you keep pressure on a wound. Her name was Brenda. She was kind, which made it worse. "Can you tell me who the primary borrower is?" I asked. A pause, the click of keys. "I'm sorry, I can't share the other party's details, but you're listed as co-borrower and guarantor on the application." Guarantor. The word my whole body had been bracing for. "I never signed anything," I said. "I'd like the application frozen, please. I did not authorize this." Brenda's tone shifted, careful now. "I understand. The thing is, the application's still in processing, pending the co-borrower's signature, and I can't simply withdraw it over the phone without verifying identity in person, given there are 2 named parties. You'd need to come in, and the other borrower would need to be notified." There it was. The wall. I'd acted. I'd frozen my credit. I'd refused my father. And still the machine was grinding forward, because a joint application with 2 names can't be killed by one phone call from one frightened daughter. The structure protected the people who'd built it. "When could it close?" I asked. "Once it's signed, it could fund within 2 weeks," she said. 2 weeks. The same 2-week shape my mother's urgency had taken. I thanked Brenda, hung up, and looked at Daniel. "They put my name on a loan," I said. "As guarantor. It's almost approved. I can't stop it over the phone." He was already pulling a legal pad toward himself, the calm settling over him that I'd married him for. "Then we don't stop it over the phone," he said. "We find the application. We document that you never consented. And we get ahead of whatever they're planning to do with it." He looked up at me. "Faye, I need you to understand something. This isn't a family argument anymore. Putting your name on a loan without your consent, using your information, that's fraud. Real fraud." I nodded slowly. I'd spent my life keeping receipts. Now I needed to find theirs. If you've ever found your own name on a bill you never agreed to pay, then you already know the cold that went through me holding that phone. Tell me in the comments if your family ever volunteered your money before they asked. And subscribe, because what I found in my father's office is the part I still can't quite believe. I needed to see the application with my own eyes, and I knew exactly where my father kept things he didn't want found. His office, the converted back bedroom, in the gray filing cabinet that had survived the bankruptcy when almost nothing else did. I couldn't just demand it. If I tipped them off, the paper would vanish and I'd look paranoid. So I did what I'd always done. I made myself useful. I called my mother, sweet as pie, and said I'd been thinking it over, that I felt terrible, that maybe I could help in smaller ways. She thawed instantly, victory in her voice. "I knew you'd come around," she said. "Come by Thursday. We'll talk." Thursday was good. Thursday, my father had his standing appointment at the VA clinic 2 towns over, gone the whole afternoon. I told myself I wasn't snooping. I was an accountant retrieving documents I had every right to see, since my own name was apparently on them. It's a thin line. I walked it anyway. When I arrived, Morgan was in the living room surrounded by tulle, trying on a veil in front of the mirror, glowing. "Look," she said, twirling. Ethan's mother picked it out. Real lace. She looked so happy that something twisted in me, because whatever I found in that cabinet was going to land on her too, and she had no idea. "It's beautiful," I said, and meant it. My mother bustled in the kitchen, thrilled to have me playing my old part. "I'll just grab the tax files from your office. Dad asked me to start his return," I called, casual, already moving down the hall. "Oh, good girl," my mother sang back, not even suspicious. That was the thing about being the responsible one for 30 years. Nobody ever questioned me near the money. I'd built that trust honestly. Now I was about to spend it. I closed the office door behind me, and my hands were perfectly steady. Bookkeeper's hands. They only shake after. The filing cabinet was locked, but my father had hidden the key in the same pen cup for 20 years, behind the dried-out highlighters. Some things never change. The top drawer was the usual graveyard: old returns, warranty cards, a folder labeled church in my mother's hand. I made myself go slowly. I was looking for anything recent, anything with a bank's name. I found it in the bottom drawer, in a crisp new manila folder that didn't match the yellowed ones around it. New folders in old cabinets always mean something. I lifted it out and set it on the desk and opened it. The first page was a loan application from Harlow Savings. My breath went shallow. There was my father's name as primary borrower. And there, on the line marked co-borrower/guarantor, was my name, Faye M. Sinclair. My old address from years ago, the apartment over the laundromat, my social security number, the full 9 digits, in my father's blocky handwriting. The signature line was the only thing blank, waiting. They hadn't forged my name yet. They were planning to get it Thursday, smiling at a planning coffee, slipped into a stack of wedding paperwork. Underneath the application was a letter from the bank, dated, requesting the co-borrower's signature to finalize a loan of $90,000. Not 50, 90. The wedding was never the number. The wedding was the cover. I stood there in my father's quiet office with the proof in my hands, and I understood, finally and completely, what I had always been to this family. Not a daughter, not even a piggy bank. A signature. A name with good credit they could mortgage when their own ran out. I always keep the receipts. For the first time, I'd found someone else's, and it had my name forged across the future. I took out my phone. I photographed every page, front and back, then put the folder back exactly as I'd found it, key behind the highlighters, drawer shut. Then I picked up the actual tax files, walked out smiling, and told my mother I'd see her Thursday. I held it together until I reached my car. Then I sat in the driveway of my childhood home and let my hands shake. Finally, the way bookkeepers' hands only do after $90,000. My name. My number. A plan to get my signature by ambush. I didn't drive straight home. I drove to my office instead, where the locks were mine and the files were mine and nobody could rewrite history. I spread the photos across my desk and made myself read them again, slowly, as evidence, and not as heartbreak. Two truths sat side by side. One, my parents needed $90,000 badly enough to commit fraud against their own child. Two, the wedding had been the delivery system, a happy occasion loud enough to cover the sound of a vault being emptied. But why 90? The second mortgage explained some of the whole, not all of it. There was still money missing, money I couldn't trace, money the wedding loan was meant to backfill before someone noticed. I thought about Morgan in her real lace veil, glowing, marrying into the Aldridge family. I thought about my mother's urgency, the deadline that had nothing to do with a wedding date. And a colder possibility took shape. What if the marriage itself was part of the math? The Aldridges had money, real money, the generational kind. My mother had spoken about Ethan's family the way a drowning person speaks about a boat. I didn't have the whole picture yet, but I had enough to know I was no longer dealing with desperate parents asking for help. I was dealing with a scheme, and I was the mark. And the only reason I wasn't already ruined was that I'd answered one phone call from a kind woman named Brenda and gotten curious instead of guilty. I called Daniel. I found it, I said. It's worse than we thought. 90,000. And I think the wedding's connected to something bigger. There was a pause. Then, in his steady lawyer's voice, come home. Bring everything. We start building tonight. We worked at our kitchen table until 2 a.m, and it was the strangest comfort I'd ever known, building a defense against my own family beside a man who loved me. Daniel created a folder of his own, a real one, the kind that holds up. He printed my photos of the application. He had me write a sworn timeline, dated and detailed, of every conversation, the SSN request, the bank call, my frozen credit. This matters, he said. It shows you acted the moment you suspected. You're not a victim who ignored the signs. You're someone who caught it and got blocked by the structure. Then he pulled my old ledgers, the ones I'd kept since I was a teenager, the quiet record of every dollar I'd ever given my family, the 211 at 16, the braces, the deposits, the totaled car, the loans that were never once repaid or even acknowledged. Years of it, line by line, in my own careful hand. What's this? He asked softly. Proof, I said, that I've been their bank since before I could vote. He looked at it for a long moment. Faye, this is the most important document you have. Not because of the money, because it shows a pattern. It shows that when they say family doesn't keep score, they only mean you're not allowed to. You kept score honestly. They kept it secretly. Something eased in my chest, hearing it named. For years, I'd felt small for remembering what I'd given. Daniel made it sound like integrity instead of pettiness. What do we do with all this? I asked. Nothing yet, he said. We wait. We let them keep thinking you're coming around. Right now they believe they're winning. That's our advantage. The worst thing we can do is warn them. I nodded. It went against every instinct I had to sit on the truth, to keep smiling at Thursday coffees while my name sat in a drawer. But I trusted him, and I was done being the one who flinched first. It took another week to find the rest, and I found it the way I find most things, by reading what people leave lying around when they think no one's watching. At a bridal luncheon I hadn't wanted to attend, Morgan got 2 glasses of wine into her and got talkative. "The best part," she confided, leaning close, "is that Ethan's dad is going to invest in Daddy's new business after the wedding. Like a real investment. Daddy showed him the books and everything. He says it's going to fix everything." I kept my face soft. "That's wonderful. What new business?" Morgan waved vaguely. "Consulting, contracting, I don't know. Daddy's good at that stuff." She wasn't lying. She just didn't understand what she was saying. But I did. The pieces clicked into a single ugly machine. My father had no real business. He had a hole, a debt he couldn't explain, and a plan to fill it from 2 directions at once. First, a $90,000 loan guaranteed by my good credit, to backstop the gap. Second, an investment from Ethan's wealthy father, secured by a beautiful wedding and a set of books that made my father look solvent. The $50,000 wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a stage set, built to make the Aldridges believe the Sinclairs were the kind of family worth investing in. And I was funding the set and guaranteeing the loan that propped up the lie. Morgan, glowing in her chair, was the bait. She didn't know it. She thought she was a princess. She was a lure. I drove home slowly that night, sick to my stomach, because now I knew the whole thing, and knowing it made me responsible for what came next. I could write the check and bury it. I could let the wedding happen and the lie hold and my name sit on a fraudulent loan forever. Or I could pull one thread and watch it all come apart, knowing innocent people, Ethan, even Morgan, would be standing too close when it did. Daniel laid it out for me plainly, the way you'd explain a diagnosis. "Here's where you actually stand," he said. "First, that loan application. You never signed it. If they forge your signature, that's fraud. And we can prove you froze your credit and refused your father before they tried. The bank already has you on record disputing it. The loan is dead the moment we say so. And if they pressure me to sign it for real? Any agreement you sign under that kind of family coercion, threats, guilt, an ambush, can be challenged as voidable. Undue influence. It's not automatic. You'd have to prove it. But the more obvious the pressure, the harder it is for them to enforce, especially when the people leaning on you are the ones who benefit." I felt the ground change under me. For weeks I'd been the prey, frightened, reacting, one step behind. Now I saw the board for what it was. They thought they held all the cards. They thought I was the same girl who handed over $200 at 16 because relief looked like love. They had no idea their loan was already a corpse, that I had photographs, a timeline, a lawyer at my own kitchen table, 16 years of ledgers, and the one thing they'd never accounted for, that I'd finally stopped being afraid. From that night on, they were playing a game I had already won. They just didn't know the score yet. "So what do I do?" I asked. Daniel smiled, slow and certain. "Nothing dramatic. You stay calm. You stay polite. You let them set their trap. And when they spring it, in front of whoever they bring to make you feel cornered, you stop being cornered." "How?" "By bringing the truth into the room with you," he said, "and by bringing me." I looked at this man, this quiet attorney my family had appraised at nothing and dismissed as a paralegal, and I started, for the first time in a long time, to feel something that wasn't dread. I felt ready. All they had to do now was invite me to dinner. The invitation came on a Sunday, in my mother's most loving voice. "Faye, honey, we want to have a real family dinner. Just us. Clear the air. Your father's been so upset about how things have been, and we hate this distance." She paused, perfectly. "And there's some wedding paperwork we should go over together, just to keep it all tidy. You're so good with that." Wedding paperwork. There it was, wrapped in linen. I looked at Daniel across the room. He nodded. "I'd love that, Mom," I said warmly. "When?" "Friday, 7 o'clock. I'm making your favorite, the pot roast." Friday. The bank had told Brenda's 2 weeks, and Friday landed right at the edge of it, the last clear day to get my signature before the loan either funded or collapsed. The wedding was 3 weeks out. The Aldridge investment Morgan had let slip was meant to close right after the ceremony. Everything my family was doing converged on one signature, on one night, at one table. They'd even chosen the weapon, the pot roast, the good chair, the warm low light, the performance of love designed to make refusal feel like cruelty. "Should I bring anything?" I asked. "Just yourself, sweetheart," my mother said. "Just family." I hung up and stood in the quiet. Daniel came and put his arms around me from behind. "You don't have to do this," he said. "We could handle it all on paper. Letters, lawyers. You never have to sit at that table." I thought about it. I really did. But some things have to happen in the room where they were planned. "No," I said. "They built this dinner to corner me. I'm going to sit in their chair, eat their pot roast, and let them spring the whole thing." I turned to face him. "And then I'm going to introduce them to my husband." He smiled. "I'll wear the good suit." "Wear the one that looks expensive?" I said. "Mom likes to know what things cost." We spent the week preparing the way I imagine soldiers prepare, calmly, thoroughly, hoping not to need half of it. Daniel made 3 copies of everything: the loan application with my forged-in details and the blank signature line, the bank letter showing 90,000, my sworn timeline, my credit freeze confirmations, and the ledgers, 16 years of them, scanned and bound into a single quiet book of every dollar I'd given and every promise they'd broken. He drafted a short letter on his firm's letterhead, naming himself as my attorney, stating clearly that I had never authorized any loan, that any document I might sign under coercion would be void, and that he was prepared to report the unauthorized use of my identity to the bank and, if necessary, the authorities. "We don't lead with threats," he said. "We lead with calm. The letter just makes calm permanent." I practiced too, though not a speech. Daniel was firm about that. "Don't rehearse lines. They'll come out stiff and they'll feel like a trap of your own. Just know your truth cold. Then say less than you want to. Let them fill the silence. People in the wrong always do." The hardest part wasn't the documents. It was Morgan. She kept texting me wedding things, color swatches, a song for the first dance, a photo of the cake topper. Little bright bombs of a future built on a foundation I knew was hollow. Every text was a reminder that when I pulled the thread, she'd fall too. I asked Daniel about it one night. "Is there a way to do this that doesn't destroy her?" He considered it honestly. "You can't control what the truth costs other people," he said. "But you can choose not to be cruel with it. There's a difference between letting something collapse and burning it down." I held on to that. I wasn't going to burn anything. I was just going to stop holding up a lie with my own 2 hands. What it did when I let go was not mine to carry. 2 days before the dinner, Morgan came to my office. She'd never once visited in the 10 years I'd had it. She came in like weather, fast and loud, past my one employee, into my back room. "I need to talk to you." She was shaking, and not entirely from anger. "Mom says you're coming Friday. She says you're going to fix everything." "Fix what exactly?" I asked quietly. "The money, the wedding, whatever's going on. You always fix it." She dropped into the chair across from me. "Ethan's mother keeps asking about the venue deposit. The florist needs a number. Everything's falling apart and everyone keeps saying it's handled, but nobody's actually paying for anything, and I'm the one who looks insane." For a second, she wasn't a villain or a lure. She was my little sister, 8 years old in front of cartoons while our mother cried over a red-stamped bill, growing up in a house where money was a ghost that haunted everyone and was never, ever discussed. Nobody had ever told her the truth either. They'd just handed her a script and a veil. "Morgan," I said carefully, "has anyone actually shown you the wedding budget? The real one, with where the money's coming from?" She blinked. "Mom handles that. With you." "I'm not paying for the wedding," I said gently. "I told them that weeks ago." Her face went white. "Then who is?" And there it was, the question at the center of everything, and my sister had never once thought to ask it. I almost told her then. The loan, the investment, the whole machine she was the bright bait for. But it was too soon, and too cruel, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't burn it down. Come Friday, I said instead. Sit with me at dinner, and whatever happens, whatever you hear, I need you to remember that I tried to ask you this first. She left more frightened than she came. I felt sorry for that. But she finally had the right question in her head. That was a gift, even if it didn't feel like one. I hadn't planned to meet Ethan before the dinner. He found me. He called my office the next morning, polite and a little nervous, and asked if we could have coffee, just the two of us. Morgan speaks about you like you're the steady one, he said, and I could use steady right now. We met at the diner where Daniel and I had eaten pie after our courthouse wedding, which felt like an omen I couldn't read yet. Ethan was younger than I expected. Earnest, the kind of young man who stands when a woman approaches the table. He loved Morgan. That was obvious in the first 30 seconds, in the way he said her name. I'll be honest, he said, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. My father's excited about helping your dad's business. Maybe too excited. He's talking about a real investment, and something about it feels fast to me. I keep asking to see the actual numbers, and everyone keeps telling me not to worry, that it's all between the families. He looked up. You do this for a living. Am I crazy for wanting to see the books before my dad writes a check? I looked at this decent young man, dragged to the edge of a cliff he couldn't see, and I made a decision. You're not crazy, I said. You're the only person in this whole thing asking the right question. Relief flooded his face, and guilt flooded mine, because I knew so much more than I could say at a diner counter 2 days early. I can't tell you everything right now, I said. But I promise you this. Don't let your father send any money until after Friday. Tell him to wait 1 week. If he trusts you at all, that's a small thing to ask. Ethan studied me. That sounds like a warning. It's a kindness, I said. Take it as one. He nodded slowly, and I think some part of him understood. I'd just thrown a rope to the one innocent man standing too close to the blast. The rest of them I'd let fall. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. So I sat in the dark of our living room, and Daniel found me there, the way he always seems to. He sat down beside me without turning on a light. Tell me something good, I said. So he told me about the day we got married, the diner pie, the way I'd laughed when the waitress congratulated us and asked if it was an anniversary. He told me he'd known he'd marry me the night I explained, completely seriously, why I found spreadsheets soothing. He told me he wasn't afraid of my family, that men who count other people's worth are always the most worthless in the room. I leaned my head on his shoulder. I kept you a secret, I said. I'm sorry for that. I was trying to protect you, but it was really because I was ashamed of them. I know, he said. And tomorrow you stop. Tomorrow I stop. I thought about my mother's gold pen, the one she'd used to push the agreement at me. I thought about the good chair, the low light, the pot roast, all the soft weapons of a family that had only ever known how to love conditionally. And I thought about the 16-year-old who gave away her class trip money and learned the wrong lesson from her mother's relieved face. I wished I could tell that girl what I knew now, that being needed isn't being loved, that a family who keeps you close only for what you provide isn't keeping you, they're harvesting you. That the word no, said once and held, is sometimes the most loving thing you can do, even if it costs you the whole table. I didn't rehearse anything, I told Daniel. Good, he said. Then it'll be true. I finally slept around 3. I dreamed, oddly, of numbers, long clean columns that finally added up. When I woke, the fear was gone. In its place was something steadier. Tomorrow, they'd find out who I married, and who I'd become. The night before that dinner, I didn't pack a speech. I packed 16 years of receipts, and a man my family had written off. If you've ever been the one who always pays, the one nobody thanks until they need you, stay with me and hit subscribe, because the next part is the one you've been waiting your whole life to watch. Friday came soft and golden, the kind of early evening that makes a small Ohio town look like a postcard. Daniel and I drove the 15 minutes to my parents' house, and he wore the suit that looked expensive, because I'd asked him to, and because some battles are won in the details. We parked down the block, out of sight. The plan was simple. I'd go in first. Alone. The way they expected. Daniel would wait in the car with the folder. When the moment came, when they sprung whatever they'd built, I'd text him a single word, and he'd come to the door. I walked up the path of my childhood home with my purse on my shoulder and my heart strangely quiet. Through the front window I could see them. My mother arranging the table, my father pacing, and something I hadn't expected. Other cars in the driveway. Nice ones. 3 sedans I didn't recognize, parked neat as soldiers. I stopped on the walk. My mother had said just family. Just us, she'd said. I looked at those 3 strange cars and understood that my mother had lied about the one thing that mattered, the size of the ambush. I texted Daniel before I even rang the bell. 3 cars. His reply came instantly. I see them. I'm close. Say the word. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door, radiant in the dress she wore to weddings and funerals both. Faye, come in. Come in. We're so glad you came. Behind her, the dining room glowed in that low yellow light. The pot roast steamed on the good platter. And around the table, in suits, with briefcases open and papers fanned, sat 3 men I had never seen in my life. My mother followed my gaze and smiled, delighted with herself. Oh, don't mind them, she said lightly. They're just friends of the family, here to help us make everything official. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me, and the dinner began. They sat me in the good chair, of course, at the foot of the table where everyone could see me. Morgan was there, pale and quiet in a way I'd never seen her, twisting her engagement ring. Ethan sat beside her, jaw tight, and when he caught my eye, he gave the smallest nod. He'd remembered. He'd told his father to wait. The 3 lawyers introduced themselves with names that slid off me like rain. They were polished, expensive, the kind of men my father could never have afforded, which told me someone else was paying, which told me the Aldridge money was already further in than anyone admitted. They weren't my parents' regular counsel, I learned later. They'd been retained to draft and notarize the agreement, told only that it was a friendly family arrangement everyone had already blessed. Nobody had mentioned a forged loan or a daughter who'd never said yes. My mother served the pot roast like it was a sacrament. For 20 minutes we performed a family, passing dishes, making small talk. My father telling a story about my childhood that recast me as the cheerful giver I'd been raised to be. Faye was always so generous, he told the lawyers, beaming. Even as a girl, she'd give you the shirt off her back. Generous. The word for someone whose boundaries you've successfully removed. I ate 3 bites and waited. I'd learned patience from the best. Finally, my mother set down her fork, dabbed her mouth, and let her face arrange itself into warm concern. Faye, sweetheart, we didn't just bring you here for dinner. Here it comes, I thought. This family's been through a hard stretch. You know that better than anyone. And we have a chance now, a real chance, to set everything right. For Morgan. For all of us. She nodded at one of the lawyers who slid a thick document down the table toward me, page after page, until it stopped against my plate. It's a family partnership agreement, my mother said smoothly. It just formalizes how we support each other. Pools our resources for the wedding and your father's new venture. Nothing complicated. I looked down at it. I didn't touch it. It's just money, Faye. Morgan said softly from across the table. The old line. But her voice broke on it now. She didn't sound sure anymore. I made them wait while I read it. That was the first thing they didn't expect. The old Faye would have signed out of love and panic. The new one was a bookkeeper, and a bookkeeper reads every line. The lawyers shifted. My mother's smile thinned. I turned the pages slowly, and there, buried on page 9 in language meant to numb you, was the whole scheme written in legalese. The agreement made me personally liable for shared family obligations, a phrase defined broadly enough to include the $90,000 loan. It named me as guarantor. It pledged my business assets as collateral. It bound me to ongoing financial support of family ventures, which was a fancy way of saying I'd be their bank forever, by contract, in writing, enforceable. They hadn't just come for $50,000. They'd come to make me their property. I looked up. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother's smile was gone now, replaced by the hard set I remembered from every fight I'd ever lost to her. "We need this signed tonight," she said, and the warmth had drained from her voice. "The wedding's in 3 weeks. Your father's investment depends on it. The bank needs it by Monday." She reached into her purse and took out the gold pen, the one from the Christmas cards, and slid it across the table until it touched my hand. "Sign this, Faye." Her eyes were flat. "Or you'll regret it. This family has carried you your whole life, and if you turn your back now, you won't have a family to come back to. Think very carefully." There it was. The threat under the love, finally said out loud in front of 3 lawyers and my pale sister and the decent man she was about to marry. The ambush, fully sprung. I looked at the pen. I looked at my mother's flat, certain eyes, and under the table where no one could see, I typed a single word to Daniel. "Now." Then I folded my hands on top of the unsigned agreement and smiled, calm as a Sunday. "Before I sign anything," I said, "there's someone I'd like you all to meet." The doorbell rang. My mother frowned, irritated at the interruption to her perfect ambush. "Who on earth?" "I'll get it," I said, and rose before anyone could stop me. I walked to the door I'd walked through 10,000 times as a girl, and I opened it, and there was Daniel, in the suit that looked expensive, holding a slim leather folder. He didn't smile. He just stepped inside like he belonged there, because he did. "Everyone," I said, leading him to the table. "This is Daniel Hartley, my husband." The word landed in that room like a stone in still water. My mother's mouth opened and closed. Morgan said, "Husband?" in a small voice. My father finally looked up. And the 3 lawyers who a moment ago had been relaxed and certain went very still, the way professionals do when an unknown variable walks into their carefully arranged equation. "We were married 14 months ago," I said, sitting back down, perfectly calm. "I kept it private. You'll understand why in a minute." Daniel remained standing. He opened his leather folder and removed a single sheet, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet and even, a voice built for courtrooms, not for shouting. "Good evening," he said to the lawyers. "I'm Faye's attorney as well as her husband. I'm going to save everyone some time." He set the sheet down where they could all see it. "This is a formal notice. My client has never authorized and will never authorize any loan, guarantee, or financial obligation on behalf of any member of this family. Any signature obtained from her tonight, under the circumstances I'm looking at, 3 attorneys, a financial threat, and the explicit words 'sign or you'll regret it,' is exactly the kind of agreement a court can throw out for coercion and undue influence. No one in this room should assume it would ever hold." One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "Mr. Hartley? This is simply a family agreement. It's a contract pledging her business as collateral for a $90,000 loan," Daniel said, not unkindly. "I've read it. Page 9. I'd be careful what you call simple in front of witnesses." The lawyer closed his mouth. My mother found her voice, and it came out shrill. "You went and got a lawyer? You brought a lawyer into your own family's home?" "No, Mom," I said gently. "You did. You brought 3. I only brought 1. And I married him." The low golden light suddenly seemed too bright, like an interrogation room. Everyone at that table understood all at once that the trap had a trap inside it, and they were the ones standing on the floor that was about to open. I reached into my purse and took out my own folder, the plain one, and I set it on the table beside the partnership agreement. I opened it slowly, because I wanted them to watch. Dad, I said, I want to start with you. He flinched at his own name. 3 weeks ago you called and asked for my social security number and my old W-9 for a family tax filing. I laid the first page down. There is no family tax filing. I'm your accountant. There never was one. I laid down the second page. This is a loan application from Harlow Savings. $90,000. You're the primary borrower. And here, on the guarantor line, is my name, my old address, my social security number, in your handwriting. The room had gone graveyard quiet. Even the lawyers were reading upside down. The only thing missing, I said, is my signature, which you plan to get tonight, slipped into a stack of wedding paperwork, while my mother made pot roast. My father's face had gone gray. Faye, I can explain. You put my name on a loan without my consent, I said, still calm, still quiet, the way Daniel had taught me. You used my identity. Do you know what that is, Dad? It isn't borrowing. It's fraud. I froze my credit the day after your call. I have it documented. The bank has me on record disputing this application before tonight. I let that sit. Mr. Hartley is right. This loan is dead. It was dead before I walked in. My father opened his mouth, but nothing came out. 16 years of teaching me that family takes care of family, and here was what he'd meant by it all along. He hadn't raised a daughter. He'd grown an asset, and when his own credit failed, he'd reached for mine. I'm not going to report you, I said, and watched the flicker of relief, the last manipulation, the assumption that mercy meant I'd still pay. Not because you deserve that, because Morgan and Mom would be caught in it, and I'm not built like you. His relief curdled into shame. It was the first honest thing I'd seen on his face in years. But you will never, I said, touch my name, my credit, or my money again. The bank gets a letter Monday. We're done. He sank back in his chair like the air had gone out of him. One down. I turned to my mother. My mother was not a woman who sank. She rose. She stood at the head of her table in her wedding and funeral dress, and the warmth was entirely gone now, the mask off, the real face under it furious and afraid. How dare you, she breathed. How dare you bring this into my house, after everything I sacrificed for you? Let's talk about the wedding, Mom, I said, not rising, because the calm one never has to. $50,000, for a barn and a florist and natural light. I turned a page in my folder. Except it was never about the wedding, was it? The wedding is a stage. You needed the Aldridges to believe this family was solvent, prosperous, worth investing in. So Ethan's father would put real money into Dad's new business. I made the quotes with my voice. A business that doesn't exist. To fill a hole I still can't fully see the bottom of. Across the table, Ethan went rigid. His eyes moved from me to my mother to my father. The financials, he said slowly. The ones my dad's been shown. The ones that made him so excited. I'd have an accountant look at those very carefully, I said to him gently. I think you'll find they describe a family that exists only on paper. My mother's voice cracked like a whip. You ungrateful girl, you have no idea what it takes to hold a family together, to keep up appearances when everything's falling apart. You think you're better than us with your little business and your secret husband. I think, I said quietly, that you taught me one sentence my whole life. Family doesn't keep score. I stood up then, finally, not in anger, just to be level with her. You said it every time you wanted something, every time the math didn't favor you. Family doesn't keep score. I let the silence stretch. You were right, Mom. Family doesn't keep score. I picked up my plain folder and held it up so the whole table could see the years of careful columns inside. That's why I did. 16 years of it, every dollar. Every promise. Somebody in this family had to keep an honest record. It turned out to be me. My mother stared at the ledgers, at the proof that the daughter she'd called generous had been quietly, devastatingly awake the entire time. And for the first time in my life, my mother had nothing to say. She just exploded into noise, accusations, tears, threats, all at once. I stood calm in the middle of it. The pen lay untouched between us. I thought I'd seen the worst of it. I hadn't. My mother, wild now, dug into her own bag and threw a small stack of printed papers down the table at me. There. You think you're so clever. We have proof you agreed. Your own words. One of the attorneys leaned in to look, then sat back, visibly uneasy, as though this part had never been explained to him. I looked down, and my heart, which had stayed so steady all night, finally cracked. It was a collection of my own text messages printed out. Years of them. Messages where I'd said things like, "Of course I'll help, and don't worry about paying me back, and I've got it, Mom." The kind, soft, automatic words of a daughter who couldn't say no. They'd saved them. For years. They'd kept my own love on file, archived it, and were planning to use my kindness as evidence that I'd voluntarily taken on the family's debt. The $211 at 16 had taught me being needed felt like being loved, and my family had taken that, the most loving thing about me, and turned it into a legal weapon to be used at my own ambush. That was the deepest cut. Deeper than the forged loan. Deeper than the threat. Not that they'd stolen my money. That they'd studied my goodness like a vulnerability and built a case out of it. I stood very still. Daniel started to speak, to object, but I touched his arm. I needed to say this one myself. "You kept my kindness as evidence," I said, and my voice didn't shake, though everything in me did. "You looked at the one part of me that loved you without conditions, and you saw a loophole." I gathered the printed messages into a neat stack and set them on top of their debt agreement. "That's not proof I owed you anything. That's proof of exactly who I'm walking away from." Ethan stood up. He'd heard enough, and he was a better man than the family trying to marry into his money. "I need to say something," he said, and his voice was steady even though his hands weren't. He looked at my parents with an expression I recognized because I'd worn it most of my life. The look of someone realizing the people across the table never saw him as a person, only as a sum. "My father was going to invest in a business that doesn't exist," he said slowly, "based on financials that aren't real. You were going to use my family's money to fill a hole, and you were going to use Morgan to do it." He turned to Morgan, and his face softened into something painful. "Did you know?" "No," Morgan whispered. "Ethan, I swear I didn't." "I believe you," he said, and I believed him believing her, and that mattered. Then he turned to me. "Thank you," he said simply. "For the warning, for telling my dad to wait. You didn't have to protect me, I'm not even family." "That's exactly why I did," I said. "You're the only one here who didn't do anything wrong." He nodded and gathered his coat, and paused at Morgan's chair. "I do love you," he told her quietly. "But I can't start a marriage standing in the middle of this. Not like this. If you want to figure out who you are away from them, really away from them, you know where to find me." And then he left, with his dignity and his family's money intact, the one clean exit from a house full of people who'd forgotten what clean looked like. I let him go without a word, because rescuing him further would have robbed him of the choice he'd just made for himself. The front door closed softly behind him. It was, I thought, the gentlest sound that House had heard all night. Morgan came apart slowly, the way the lucky ones do, all at once, and decades late. She sat in the wreckage of her wedding and looked at our parents like she was seeing them for the first time. "You used me," she said. Not a question. All of it. The dress, the venue, the Aldridges. I thought it was for me. I thought, for once, I was the one being taken care of. She laughed, and it broke in the middle. "I was just the bait." "Morgan," my mother started. "Don't." Morgan turned to me, mascara ruined, and there it was, the near sympathy moment I'd promised myself I wouldn't waste. "You tried to ask me," she said. "At your office. You asked if I'd seen the real budget. You tried to warn me, and I called you jealous in my head. I've called you so many things. I know, I said. It's just money, Faye, she whispered. The old line, our family's catechism. And this time it came out as a question she'd never thought to ask before. Is that what you really thought it was? All those years? I thought, I said carefully, that if I kept paying, you'd all keep loving me. I was wrong about the math too, Morgan. Just in a different direction. She didn't get a clean exit like Ethan. She'd taken too much, said too much, believed too easily the story where I was the selfish one. But she wasn't the architect of this. She was a girl raised on a script, just like me, handed a different role. I wasn't going to redeem her tonight, or pretend the years away. But I wasn't going to slam the last door either. When you're ready to look at things honestly, I said, really honestly, not the family version, call me, not for money. I'm done with money. But I'll answer. 2 rings, I thought. I'll let it ring twice, then pick up. That's the most I had left to give. It would have to be enough. There wasn't much left to say, and that itself was new. In my family, the fights had always gone for hours, looping and reopening, because nothing was ever really decided, only postponed until the next time they needed me. This was decided. The lead attorney had already closed his folder. If any part of what I've heard tonight is accurate, he said stiffly, sliding the agreement out of my mother's reach, this firm cannot be a party to it. We're withdrawing. I'd strongly advise you to seek separate counsel, and not to put your daughter's name on anything again. The other 2 were already packing their briefcases, eager to be gone from a job that had curdled into liability. My father sat hollow in his chair. My mother stood rigid, still searching for the lever that had always worked. The guilt, the history, the word family, and finding every one of them dead in her hand. I gathered my folder, the ledgers, the printed proof of my own kindness, and I left their dead agreement on the table where it belonged. Daniel put his hand at the small of my back, not to lead me, just to be there. We'll send the letter to the bank Monday, he said to the room, professional to the end. And I'd strongly advise everyone here to retain real counsel before attempting anything like this again. At the door, my mother made her last try. Her voice came small and trembling, the weapon of first and last resort. Faye, if you walk out that door, that's it. You won't have a family. I stopped. I turned around, and I looked at the table, the good chair, the low golden light, the gold pen still lying there untouched, the pot roast gone cold, the people who had spent 34 years teaching me that my love was a line of credit. Mom, I said, and I wasn't angry, which I think frightened her most of all. I haven't had a family in a long time. I've had a balance due. I opened the door. The evening air came in, cool and clean and ordinary. I just stopped paying it. And I walked out of my childhood home with my husband beside me and 16 years of receipts in my arms, into the last good light of the day. The fallout was quieter than I expected, the way real consequences usually are. Daniel sent the letter to Harlow's Savings on Monday morning. The loan application died without a sound, flagged for unauthorized use, my name cleared from it permanently. My father, faced with a paper trail and a lawyer son-in-law, didn't fight it. The $90,000 he'd been chasing simply evaporated, and the hole in his finances stayed a hole, because it had always been his hole, not mine. The wedding didn't happen, at least not the $50,000 version built to impress people who were never really friends. Ethan's father, once Ethan told him to wait and then told him why, withdrew his interest in the imaginary business so fast you could almost hear the door. Without the Aldridge money, the whole scheme my parents had built collapsed under its own weight. I didn't celebrate that. Watching people you once loved get caught in a trap of their own making isn't triumph. It's just gravity. The relatives who'd called me selfish went quiet when the real story trickled out, the way it always does in small towns, through cousins and church pews. A few even called to apologize, which I accepted without warmth and without grudge. I was done keeping that particular score. Morgan and I are not close. I won't pretend otherwise. But she did call me, about 2 months later, not for money, just to tell me she'd moved into her own apartment 2 towns over and gotten a job, and started seeing a counselor who kept asking her hard questions about our childhood. "I'm trying to learn the difference," she said, "between being needed and being loved." I almost cried, because that was my whole life in one sentence, and my little sister had found it on her own. We talk now sometimes. It's not what it was. It's better, because it's honest. And honest is the only thing I trust anymore. Ethan, last I heard, is doing well. He and Morgan didn't get back together, but they parted as decent people. Which is more than this family usually manages. My parents and I don't speak. My mother sent one letter, 3 pages, that started with an apology and ended, by page 3, asking if I might reconsider helping with the second mortgage. I read it once. I didn't reply. Some people show you exactly who they are, and the kindest thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is finally believe them. As for me, I told my clients the truth, that I'd been keeping books for everyone but myself, and I started doing my own. Daniel and I had a real dinner that Friday, the next one, just the 2 of us, at the diner with the pie. I told the waitress it was our anniversary, 14 months and counting, and I didn't lower my voice when I said his name. For the first time in my life, the columns added up. Not because I'd paid everyone off, because I'd finally stopped letting people draw on an account I never agreed to open. The phone still rings sometimes. I still let it ring twice, out of habit. But now, when I pick up, it's because I want to. And that, it turns out, is the difference between a family and a balanced due. Here's what I know now. The only line worth keeping from all those ledgers. Kindness was never the problem. The problem was a family that read my kindness as a balance they were entitled to draw on forever. And the day I closed the account, I didn't lose a family. I finally found out I'd been carrying one that was never really mine to carry. So that's how one quiet sentence emptied a room. The gold pen, the 3 lawyers, the $90,000 with my name forged across the future. If your love has ever come with an invoice attached, set the boundary before the bill arrives, then tell me in the comments where you finally said no and meant it. Some of you needed to hear this today. Subscribe, stay close, and I'll see you in the next story.